Welcome back to Sunrise, live right here on ETV. Thanks for staying with us as we continue this Friday morning. Now, the repo rate has remained the same at 7%. The South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago announced yesterday. Now, the prime lending rate also remains at 10.5%. And here to speak to us more on what these means for South Africans is senior economist at NKC African Economics, Elize Kruger. Remember, to be part of our conversation as well, you can share your thoughts with us by giving us a call if you'd like on 011-447-1742, or your comments are welcome on our Facebook as well as our Twitter pages. Good morning to you, Elize, and thanks very much for joining us this morning. Okay, so the Reserve Bank Governor made this announcement yesterday. Now, the repo rate and prime lending rate remains the same. What exactly does that mean for me as a consumer?
Well, that would mean that whatever your repayment is on your bond or a car loan or so will remain unchanged. So the cost of your credit has not changed. In yesterday's meeting, it was actually clear that the case is building for a potential of a lowering of the interest rates sometime in future. But depending on how our situation in terms of the political side plays out, as well as, the risk of further credit rating downgrades in South Africa, if it wasn't for those, pertinent risks that the Reserve Bank pointed out, we were actually looking at a scenario where inflation has started to decline, the economy is very weak, so there's really a case to be made that sometime in future, should the other risks, do not play out negatively, one could perhaps start to look at a scenario where consumers could see interest rates coming down a bit. Okay,
so let's maybe delve in deeper on those risk and influential factors that made him, to make the decision that they made yesterday. He did say that I think 5 in the committee, wanted to remain, and another member said no, things should be different. What were the influential factors to that decision?
Yes, I think the main thing yesterday was pointed out to be the risk that the rand exchange rate could perhaps depreciate significantly if we have further credit rating downgrades in South Africa. That has really been the major focus point. The rand has been quite resilient, quite strong, having come back from levels that we've seen after the cabinet reshuffle and the credit rating downgrades, close to 14 rand. We're back, below 13. So the rand has come back a lot, but the bank, flagged the risk that the rand could weaken again, especially if we see further credit rating downgrades from Moody's Investor Services. They are due to give their assessment of the country's ratings, before the end of May, June, in the next, say, 6 weeks. And also S&P Global Ratings is due to give another credit review on the 2nd of June. And at the moment, we've got a sub-investment grade rating from S&P Global Ratings for our foreign currency debt, but still the investment grade rating for our local currency debt. And if S&P would decide to lower that as well and also downgrade our local currency debt to sub-investment grade, it could have further implications for capital flowing out of South Africa and therefore potential rand weakness. And the bank was jittery about that prospect. So I think once that is out of the way, meaning whether it happened or not, maybe the bank will feel a bit more at ease to look at the future, because the future really at this point in time indicate to us lower inflation rates. And the bank have lowered their forecast for headline inflation yesterday for this year down to 5.7 and next year down to 5.3. So that's within the target band of the Reserve Bank. So in normal circumstances, without significant risk, that could have signaled, a potential cut in interest rates.
Okay, since the double downgrade earlier in the year, what has been done to sort of reverse the effects, to make it less painful for the consumer? What do you think of what are the steps that we're taking?
Well, that's a problem. We haven't done anything really since, it was announced. I think the impact on the consumer is very much on a confidence level. Consumers are not sure, households are not sure what this economy entails for the next year or two with this downgrade. And yes, indeed, borrowing costs will be higher over time. And also on the overall economy, the impact is depressing. So if the employment environment is already difficult, now it's going to be more difficult. And if you're already concerned that you might not keep your job, you will be more concerned. And if you're in this environment of low confidence, you tend to be very conservative on your spending. So, you'll think about your car and say, I'm going to drive it another year or two, or rather, maintain it than to buy a new car and extend more debt. Because I'm not quite sure what's going on in this country. What side will we go? We're going to go completely junk and the rand will slide, and we've got more inflation and high interest rates. So while we don't quite know, let's stay on our sort of conservative, and that reduce the spending rate.
Okay, but I mean, does that mean that until there's a turnaround in the political situation, and because instability is one of the things that I think that he stated, there's not likely to be anything to happen really until before 2019, so to say, but with what's going on with the ANC and all of that. But how directly does that influence such decisions?
Yes, indeed. I think we're a bit in a period of limbo, muddling along, going nowhere slowly, meaning we're just really not making progress. We're just going sideways in economic growth, in employment, in all the important aspects of the economy. We're not really making progress. We're not attracting capital. We're not, making it easy for companies to invest in our country, given uncertainty about politics, policy, and so forth. So it's really a matter of risk, and the risk is something that will keep the Reserve Bank also basically in an unchanged monetary policy stance. So they could have lowered rates if it wasn't for all these sort of risks above our heads. Not sure what's going to happen to credit ratings, not sure what's happening on the politics, and so forth. So yes, I want to agree with you. Until we have our politics sorted out a bit better, we know what's the road ahead, who's our next president, will the policies be market friendly or not? Will we embark on maybe an unaffordable nuclear program, and that will be a burden on all of the South African taxpayers? Whatever road we go, that will influence, the scope and sort of the space that the Reserve Bank would have to lower rates or not. And actually yesterday Lesetja also indicated that they don't want to keep the door completely closed for even if they need to maybe have a reaction to a shock. So, and I think with that he implicitly mean if there's really a big shock, they would even hike rates. So that uncertainty is just too big at the moment. All
right, now China has now also been downgraded. I mean, what does this mean for we in BRICS? It's a relationship we have with them as a country. What does it mean for that relationship?
Well, I think number one, they're still investment grade, so it was a one-notch downgrade by Moody's, but they're still investment grade. So it's not really a very significant, action.
But what should we read into it?
Well, what you should read into that is that the major credit ratings agencies are looking at developments in China and saying that there are some debt developments that can be unsustainable, meaning, credit growth has gone up too much, and that could perhaps, create like a bubble on the credit market that could over time, ended up in, in shatters like we've seen in the global financial crisis in the US. So there's just flagging the risk that some of, the imbalances have grown a bit too much out of proportion in China. But, growth-wise, we still think that they will have a reasonable growth rate in the order of 6.5 to 6.6% this year. So we do not foresee a hard landing in China that will really impact negatively on commodity markets worldwide in the short term. So it was more an identification of a concerning trend developing, but it's at a level where they are still investment grade, and they are busy also rebalancing the economy from a very investment-led growth economy to more consumption growth. And in that process, there is a moderation as well taking place in the overall growth rate, but it's still at, I would say, comfortable levels. I don't think it will really impact significantly negative on South Africa, for instance.
Okay, so the countries, how does a country, would you say, currently stands economically?
South Africa?
Yeah.
Sure, I think we are just on the cliff of further deterioration. If we can manage to not have further downgrades, we will probably muddle along, for a while until we have better clarity on policy. But unfortunately, with a growth rate expected this year of about 0.9, that's below our potential. That's too low to address unemployment and social inequalities in South Africa. So we are not at a place where we could be happy or satisfied. We're at a place where we should be uncomfortable to say we need to find ways, and government need to help us, to foster growth in South Africa, make it easy for companies to invest and to employ people, rather than to, create uncertainties about policy and, property ownership and all of those important factors.
Okay, so talking about investing and creating jobs, General Motors announced earlier in the week that they're leaving the South African market. I mean, what should we understand about that, such a decision? Well,
General Motors' decision was part of a global strategy. It was not only South Africa. So I think, well, it just shows that we're in that part of the basket that's not so attractive at the moment. I think partly due to probably our low growth prospects, and probably also partly due to high labor costs, so you can manage to manufacture those vehicles for a lower labor cost somewhere else in the world, i.e. give the company a higher return. So yes, it's not only South African specific, but I think, the factors that have been negative for the economy as a whole have played a role, meaning, political uncertainty, policy uncertainty. I think it's a very big thing for companies that want to invest big on like plants and capex. You need to know, what's government's plan in terms of property ownership, what's their plans in terms of corporate taxes, all the important factors that will drive an investment. There need to be clarity on those. In South Africa at the moment, we tend to be very hear lots of different talk about policy, so that creates uncertainty. So I think that was definitely playing a role, although it wasn't a South African specific. I think it's more of a global assessment, where can we get better returns for our investment. Okay. South Africa didn't make that test.
So with the announcement yesterday, I mean, the reaction by the markets to that, any connection that we saw response to that?
To be honest, I haven't checked the markets really this morning, so I can't really comment too much on that. But I think, the unchanged stance, was expected unanimously by all economists that I think, contributed to polls and so on. So it wasn't an unexpected decision. And I think, the fact that it came over is actually quite dovish underlying, could signal to markets that yes, if things improve, if we do not see risks materializing significantly negative, we might perhaps have scope for a lowering in interest rates, and that will be positive for economic growth. It will be positive for the consumer in the sense that you'll have slightly higher real wage because inflation is coming down, so that gives you a bit more spending power in your pocket, and you'll have a slightly lower bond repayment or a slightly lower repayment on your car loan. That will all on the edge just help consumers that are already struggling and that's already under pressure in the economy.
Okay, so if you were to give like a tips to the consumer, on the backdrop of that yesterday and what's currently going on, what are the things that I can do to sort of like, survive through this tide?
Yes, I think most important, you need to be conservative because there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, we are looking at the different scenarios. It could go worse in South Africa or it could go better. So, while we're not knowing quite in what direction we're going to end up, be conservative, have a budget, stick to your budget, try not to extend much credit, especially sort of short-term consumption credit, rather keep to your longer-term, sort of good debt, meaning house, house bonds and so on. Live conservative while it's a difficult environment, and be happy with the...
be content! Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for talking to us.